Do not move. The Alpha King spoke so quietly that Emily Carter almost believed the words were meant for someone else. One heartbeat earlier, she had been crossing the moon court with 12 crystal glasses balanced on a silver tray, desperately hoping to survive the royal feast without giving Madeline another reason to call her the clumsiest maid in Blackwood Palace. Then a shoulder struck hers from behind. The tray tipped. Crystal chimed against silver. Emily's shoes slipped across the polished marble, and the entire ballroom seemed to tilt beneath her. She expected the floor. Instead, two strong arms caught her. Emily opened her eyes and forgot how to breathe. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood was holding her in front of nearly 300 silent guests. His black hair caught the gold of the chandeliers, but his silver-gray eyes were fixed entirely on her. "Your Majesty," Emily whispered. Heat rushed into her face. "I am so sorry." She tried to straighten herself. Adrian's arm tightened just enough to stop her. "I said do not move." A nervous murmur traveled through the court. Emily froze. Adrian Blackwood was famous for keeping everyone at a distance. Noble daughters practiced for months simply to dance with him. Council members measured every word before entering his presence. Yet now he was holding an ordinary Omega Maid as if releasing her would create a problem neither of them understood. Emily swallowed. "Am I in trouble?" Something flickered across Adrian's face. Not anger. Confusion. For years, the wolf inside him had remained a restless presence beneath perfect royal discipline, always alert, always pacing. Tonight it had been particularly unsettled beneath the noise, perfume, music, and hundreds of competing scents filling the moon court. But the instant Emily fell against him, everything inside Adrian became still, completely still. That frightened him more than losing control ever could. Emily noticed his fingers tremble once before becoming steady again. "Your Majesty?" Adrian slowly looked around the ballroom, as though remembering that they were not alone. Near the throne, Lady Victoria Hale stood motionless with a jeweled glass in her hand. Commander Ethan Cole had already begun moving through the crowd. Head housekeeper Madeline Cross looked horrified. Emily tried once more to step away. The moment she created even a little distance, dizziness swept through her. Candlelight blurred into gold streaks. Her knees weakened. Adrian caught her again before she could stumble. "Emily." Her eyes snapped toward him. She had never introduced herself to the king. "How do you know my name?" Adrian did not answer. His attention had shifted to her right hand. A reddish trace of spilled wine glistened across her fingertips. Emily remembered the strange-smelling glass, the sweet herbal scent, the sudden collision near the servants' entrance. Adrian gently lifted her wrist without touching the stain. His expression changed. The confusion vanished, replaced by sharp concentration. "Where did this come from?" "One of the glasses," Emily whispered. "Someone bumped into me." Adrian looked toward the scattered crystal near the ballroom entrance, then toward Ethan. The commander understood the silent order and immediately changed direction. Around them, hundreds of guests waited. Emily's heartbeat sounded impossibly loud. Adrian looked back at her, his voice low and controlled. "Emily, think carefully." His silver-gray eyes held hers. "Who touched that glass?" "Nobody touched the glass after I picked up the tray," Emily said, then stopped as a memory surfaced. "At least, I do not think they did." Adrian watched her carefully. "Start from the beginning." Emily glanced around the moon court. Hundreds of faces were still turned toward her, and the attention made her want to shrink into her plain black dress. She had spent 2 years learning how to disappear inside Blackwood Palace. Servants who moved quietly were rarely noticed. Emily had never mastered that skill. When nervous, she dropped napkins, bumped tables, and once walked directly into a decorative suit of armor while carrying fresh linens. Madeline Cross had called her Clumsy Emily ever since. Earlier that evening, Emily had already felt wrong. The ballroom was warm, but the uncomfortable heat beneath her skin seemed to come from somewhere deeper. Sounds felt. Sharper. Perfume seemed stronger. Even the rustling of gowns 20 feet away had distracted her. She had found Madeline in the West Service pantry before the feast. "Mrs. Cross, may I sit out the first service?" Emily had asked. "I am feeling strange." Madeline had barely looked at her. "Tonight is the moon feast. We are already short-handed. I understand, but I feel dizzy. Drink some water and finish your assignment." Emily had obeyed. She always obeyed. 20 minutes later, She returned to the pantry and found a silver tray prepared near the service doors. 12 crystal glasses stood in perfect rows. Emily checked them automatically before lifting the tray. That was when she smelled it. 11 glasses carried the familiar scent of red wine. The 12th had something underneath it. Sweet, herbal, almost floral, but with a bitter edge that made her hesitate. I noticed one glass smelled different, Emily told Adrian. His expression sharpened. Did you drink from it? No. Did anyone ask you to? No. I thought perhaps the glass had not been rinsed properly, so I decided to take it to the senior steward. Adrian glanced toward Ethan, who had reached the scattered crystal near the entrance and was quietly directing 2 guards to keep everyone away from it. What happened next? Emily closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember. The narrow service corridor. The tray in her hands. Music drifting through the open ballroom doors. Then footsteps. Someone came behind me. A servant. I do not know. I never saw their face. Her heartbeat quickened. They hit my shoulder hard enough to spill some of the wine onto my hand. I turned around, but there were people everywhere. Adrian's gaze dropped to the reddish stain across her fingertips. What do you remember? Emily concentrated. Dark fabric passing through the doorway. A flash of polished shoes. Then something else. Orange blossoms. Adrian frowned. What? Perfume. Strong orange blossom perfume. She opened her eyes. I remember because palace servants are not supposed to wear fragrance during formal service. Across the ballroom, Ethan suddenly looked toward them. He had found something among the broken. Crystal. Adrian raised one hand, signaling him to wait. Emily, after the wine touched you, how long before you became dizzy? Maybe 7 minutes. The answer seemed to change something in Adrian. Emily tried to step away again, embarrassed by how closely they still stood. At once, the strange pressure returned beneath her ribs and the room tilted. Adrian moved nearer. The sensation eased almost immediately. Emily stared at him. He had felt it too. She could see that in his eyes. Before either could speak, Ethan approached carrying a piece of crystal wrapped carefully in white cloth. Your Majesty, he said quietly. This was not a general serving glass. Emily looked at the fragment. A tiny silver wolf had been etched near its base. Ethan met Adrian's gaze. It came from the king's private service. That glass was meant for you? Emily asked. Adrian did not answer immediately. His attention remained on the tiny silver wolf etched into the crystal fragment Ethan held beneath the chandelier light. The emblem was unmistakable. Every member of the royal household knew that Blackwood private service was reserved for the king alone. It appears so, Adrian finally said. Emily looked down at her stained fingers, and the uncomfortable warmth beneath her skin suddenly felt colder somehow. Then I should have reported it sooner. You noticed something trained palace staff missed, Adrian said. Do not turn that into a failure. Before Emily could answer, the dizziness returned, stronger than before. Sounds sharpened until every whisper in the moon court seemed to reach her at once. She heard silk moving, glasses touching tables, the crackle of fireplaces along the walls. Then Adrian stepped closer, and the overwhelming noise softened. Emily stared at him. Adrian's expression told her he had noticed the change too. Ethan lowered his voice. The royal healer is coming. Close the court, Adrian ordered. No one leaves until we know what happened. Ethan nodded and moved away. A murmur spread among the guests as the palace doors were quietly secured. Emily felt hundreds of curious eyes following her when Adrian guided her toward a quieter, sitting area beside the ballroom. I can walk by myself, she said. I know. He released her immediately. Emily took 3 steps. The pressure beneath her ribs tightened. For steps. Her heartbeat quickened. By the 5th, she stopped and pressed one hand against the back of a chair. Adrian was beside her almost instantly. The pressure eased. That is impossible, Emily whispered. I agree. A silver-haired woman carrying a leather medical case hurried toward them. Dr. Margaret Wells had served the Blackwood family for decades, and unlike everyone else in the room, she showed no interest in court gossip. Your hand, she said. Emily extended it. Margaret studied the dried wine carefully, then opened a small bottle and held it near the stain. Her expression became serious. Moonroot. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You are certain? Certain enough to treat her immediately. Margaret mixed several drops from another bottle into water and handed it to Emily. Drink slowly. You are safe, but you need to stay calm while your body clears it. Emily obeyed. What does Moonroot do? It can cause feverish discomfort, dizziness, heightened senses, and confusion in small amounts. Reactions vary. Margaret glanced toward Adrian. But it should not cause what I just witnessed. What did you witness? Emily asked. Margaret pointed toward the far side of the sitting area. Your Majesty, step back. Adrian hesitated, then moved away. 6 feet. Emily felt the pressure return. 8 feet. Her breathing became shallow. 10 feet. Adrian stopped abruptly, one hand closing around the back of a chair as though he had felt the same invisible pull. Come back, Margaret said. Adrian crossed the distance. Before he reached Emily, her heartbeat had already begun slowing. Adrian exhaled at almost the same moment. Margaret stared at them both. Again, she said. They repeated the test. The result was identical. Emily's unease deepened. Is the Moonroot causing this? Margaret shook her head slowly. No. Ethan returned carrying a cream-colored service card recovered from the pantry records. We traced the tray, he said. It left the West Pantry 7 minutes before Emily entered the ballroom. Adrian looked at the card. Destination? Ethan's expression hardened. Your private table. Emily felt the meaning settle over her. Someone had prepared a suspicious glass for the Alpha King. Someone had deliberately collided with her, and whatever had happened afterward had awakened something neither she nor Adrian could explain. Margaret looked between them, her voice barely above a whisper. The Moonroot explains what happened to Emily tonight. It does not explain why being near the king makes both of you better. Someone wanted that glass to reach me. Adrian's voice was quiet, but the words changed the atmosphere around them. Emily looked toward the distant royal table, where his setting remained untouched beneath the blackwood crest. The thought made her stomach tighten. She had spent the evening believing she was responsible for ruining a royal celebration. Now the broken glass on the marble floor felt less like evidence of her clumsiness and more like the remains of a plan she had interrupted without knowing it. Ethan studied the cream-colored service card. The pantry record confirms the tray was prepared for your private table at 8:45. Emily entered the Moon Court 7 minutes later. Who prepared it? Adrian asked. 3 servants handled the tray during preparation. None of them remembers adding anything unusual. Margaret closed her medical case. Then whoever interfered with the wine may have done it after the tray left the pantry. Emily remembered the narrow corridor again. Footsteps. Dark fabric. Orange blossoms. The person who bumped into me. Ethan looked at her. Possibly. But we do not assume anything until we have evidence. Adrian nodded once. Check everyone who had access to that corridor. Emily shifted her weight, and another faint wave of dizziness passed through her. Adrian noticed before she could hide it. She needs somewhere quieter. Margaret agreed. The medicine is working, but the Moonroot will take time to clear completely. Ethan ordered 2 guards to remain near the recovered crystal while Adrian led Emily and Margaret through a side passage into the east drawing room. The sudden silence was almost startling after. The crowded ballroom. A fire burned beneath a carved stone mantel, and blue moonlight stretched across the carpet from tall windows overlooking Blackwood Valley. Emily sat carefully in a velvet chair. Adrian remained nearby. Your Majesty, she said, you should return to the court. Why? Because you are the king. That is precisely why I can decide where I need to be. Emily almost smiled despite herself. Margaret checked her pulse, then glanced toward Adrian. Let us try the distance again. Adrian crossed the room slowly. At 6 feet, Emily felt only mild pressure. At 8, it tightened beneath her ribs. At 10, her senses sharpened unpleasantly. Adrian stopped at nearly 12 feet, his expression suddenly strained. Enough, Margaret said. He returned. The discomfort faded from Emily almost immediately. She looked at him. You feel it too. Adrian hesitated, then answered honestly. Yes. Since when? Since you fell into my arms. Margaret frowned. That matters. Emily folded her hands together. What does it mean? I do not know yet, Margaret said. And I would rather give you no answer than the wrong one. A knock sounded at the door. Ethan entered carrying another document. We found the original serving schedule. He laid it on the table. Emily leaned forward. Her name appeared beside West Gallery Service. That was my assignment, she said. Ethan placed a second sheet beside it. On that version, Emily Carter had been moved to Royal Floor Service. This change was entered less than an hour before the feast. Emily stared at the handwriting. Who authorized it? We are tracing that now. Adrian's expression became unreadable. Ethan continued, there is another problem. The person who changed the assignment knew exactly which route would place Emily beside your private service corridor. Emily felt a chill move across her arms. So my being there might not have been an accident. We do not know that yet, Ethan said carefully. Adrian stepped closer to the table. Until we do, Emily does not return to the servants' wing alone. She looked up sharply. Am I being confined? Adrian met her gaze. Protected. Those are not always different things. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Adrian nodded. You are right. So you choose where you stay, and guards will protect the location from outside. Emily studied him, surprised. He had changed his order because she challenged it. Before she could answer, Ethan looked down at the altered schedule again. Whoever arranged this knew the palace, knew the king's service route, and knew Emily would be easy to blame if something went wrong. Emily stared at her own name on the page. For years, being overlooked had made her feel insignificant. Tonight, someone had counted on it. Emily looked at her name on the altered schedule until the letters seemed unfamiliar. Someone had chosen her because she was easy to overlook. The realization should have made her feel small. Instead, something inside her hardened into quiet determination. I want to stay in the East guest suite, she said. It is close to Dr. Wells, and the guards can remain outside. Adrian nodded. Then that is where you stay. No argument. No royal command disguised as concern. Emily noticed. Margaret noticed too. Before anyone could speak again, a guard knocked, and Ethan stepped into the hallway to meet him. He returned less than a minute later with a troubled expression. Someone entered Emily's room in the servants' wing. Emily rose. What? Your belongings were disturbed. Drawers opened, wardrobe searched, mattress moved. Nothing appears to be missing. A cold feeling settled beneath Emily's ribs. Then they were looking for something. That is my conclusion, Ethan said. Adrian's expression sharpened. The crystal? Possibly. Whoever searched the room may believe Emily kept something from the tray. Emily remembered the broken glass, the wine across her fingers, the confusion after she fell. But I did not take anything. They do not know that, Ethan replied. Adrian moved toward the door. Double the guards around this floor. Emily stepped after him. Wait. He turned. If someone believes I have evidence, hiding me behind more guards might tell them exactly where I am. Adrian studied her for a moment. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that you stop making decisions about me while I am standing in the room. Ethan looked away, unsuccessfully hiding the beginning of a smile. Adrian did not seem offended. Fair. Emily took a breath. I want protection. I do not want to become a prisoner because somebody else committed a crime. Agreed. The answer came without hesitation. Then we protect you without isolating you. Something about those words eased her more effectively than Margaret's medicine. Emily returned to the chair and searched her memory again. The corridor, the collision, the disappearing figure, orange blossoms. The perfume, she said. Ethan immediately focused on her. You remembered something? Not a face. But the scent was expensive, strong enough that I noticed it even before my senses became strange. Ethan nodded slowly. Palace servants cannot wear perfume during formal service. Exactly. Then whoever struck you may not have been a servant. Adrian looked toward the closed door, thinking, or wanted to appear as someone who was not working. Margaret finished checking Emily's pulse. Her Moonroot symptoms are fading faster than expected. Emily glanced at Adrian. Because he is here? That is what concerns me. Margaret opened her case and removed a small notebook. Moonroot can heighten what already exists. It cannot create a connection between two people from nothing. Adrian became very still. Emily caught the change. You know something? I know old stories, he said. Stories are not evidence. What stories? Before Adrian could answer, Ethan returned to the altered schedule and examined the authorization marks beneath Emily's name. There are 2 approvals here. He pointed to the first, one from household management, then the second, and one from the Royal Council office. Emily leaned closer. Who signed the household approval? Ethan studied the initials. Emily recognized them before he spoke. Her stomach dropped. Madeline Cross, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Emily thought of Madeline refusing to let her leave the feast, sending her back to work despite her dizziness. For the first time that night, those ordinary moments no longer felt ordinary. Adrian looked at Ethan. Question her, but do not accuse her. I want facts. Ethan left immediately. Emily stared into the fire, wondering how many people inside Blackwood Palace had known where she would be tonight. Margaret closed her notebook. While he does that, I need your family history. Emily looked up. Why? Margaret glanced at Adrian, then back at her. Because if Moonroot only awakened something that already existed, I need to know what, exactly, was sleeping. My family history is not very interesting, Emily said. Margaret pulled a chair closer to the fire and opened her notebook. Tonight has already taught us that appearances can be misleading. Emily considered where to begin. My mother was Helen Carter. She worked in a commercial laundry outside Cedar Ridge. My father repaired farm equipment. Neither of them had anything to do with royal families, ancient bloodlines, or whatever you were thinking. Your mother's parents? Margaret asked. I never knew them. She rarely spoke about her childhood. Adrian remained near the fireplace, close enough to keep the strange pressure between them quiet without crowding her. Did she ever mention another family name? Emily shook her head. A knock interrupted them. Ethan entered carrying a thick leather ledger that looked older than everyone in the room. The palace archive found Emily's original employment record. He placed it on the table and opened to a marked page. There is something unusual. Emily leaned forward. Her own name appeared in faded black ink beside the date she had entered palace service. Beneath it were the names of her parents. Margaret traced one line with her finger. Helen Carter, formerly Helen Bennett. Emily stared at the page. Bennett, your mother's birth name, Margaret said. Apparently. Ethan opened another ledger. We followed it backward through regional records. He turned several fragile pages before stopping. Helen's mother was Evelyn Bennett. Emily felt an unexpected ache at seeing the name of a grandmother she had never known. Beside Evelyn's entry was a tiny crescent symbol drawn in faded blue ink. Margaret became completely still. Adrian noticed immediately. You recognize it? Margaret nodded. Moonbound. Emily looked between them. What does that mean? Margaret rested both hands on the ledger. Long before the current royal system, certain Omega families were recorded as moonbound. The old histories described them as unusually sensitive to the instincts of powerful alphas. Their presence could create calm where ordinary dominance created conflict. Emily gave a nervous laugh. You have the wrong family. I spill coffee when someone watches me pour it. Adrian's mouth almost curved into a smile. Margaret did not. The Moonbound line disappeared from official records generations ago, or everyone believed it did. Emily looked again at the crescent beside Evelyn Bennett's name. And you think my grandmother belonged to it? I think this symbol gives us a reason to investigate. Emily turned toward Adrian. He had become unusually quiet. You already knew what Moonbound meant. Blackwood heirs study the old histories. Then tell me the part she is not telling me. Margaret sighed softly. Adrian met Emily's eyes. The last documented Moonbound Omega connected to this kingdom lived nearly 200 years ago. Connected how? She formed a bond with a Blackwood Alpha. Silence filled the drawing room. Emily heard the clock above the mantel and the faint wind beyond the windows. She looked from Adrian to the open ledger. So an ancestor of mine was bonded to an ancestor of yours, and now being more than 10 feet apart makes both of us uncomfortable? We do not know whether Evelyn was your direct moonbound ancestor, Margaret cautioned. And we do not know what this connection is yet. Emily stood. Good. Because I do not want an old book deciding my life. Adrian's expression softened. Neither do I. What if the records say this is destiny? Then the records can describe history. They cannot make your choices. Emily studied him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. Margaret checked the time. The Moonroot should be nearly cleared from your system now. If the connection remains after that, we will know it was not created tonight. Emily swallowed. And if it remains? Adrian answered before Margaret could. Then we learn what it means without deciding what it means for you. Emily looked at him for a long moment. The Alpha King could have treated an ancient bond like a royal claim. Instead, he was giving her room to question it. Ethan quietly turned another page of the ledger. His eyes narrowed. There is one more thing. He rotated the book toward Adrian. Beneath Evelyn Bennett's crescent symbol was an old handwritten notation bearing the Blackwood seal. Margaret read it twice before looking at Emily. Your grandmother's family was not merely recorded by the palace. She paused. The crown was protecting them. Protecting them from what? Emily asked. Margaret studied the faded notation while Ethan carefully held the old ledger beneath the lamplight. It does not say, Margaret replied. Only that information concerning the Bennett line was restricted by royal order. Emily looked at Adrian. Your family hid mine? Possibly protected it, he said. But I will not pretend those words mean the same thing until we know why. That answer mattered. Adrian never seemed interested in making uncertainty sound convenient. Emily stepped toward the window, stopping before the distance between them became uncomfortable. Beyond the glass, Blackwood Valley rested beneath silver moonlight. Less than 3 hours ago, her greatest concern had been surviving the feast without dropping anything. Now someone had interfered with the king's wine, searched her room, and apparently awakened a connection buried inside her family for generations. Suppose Margaret confirms this bond, Emily said. What happens then? Silence answered first. Margaret closed the ledger. There are old royal laws concerning recognized moonbound connections. Emily turned. What kind of laws? Adrian reached for the silver wolf clasp at his collar and removed it. He placed it beside the ancient ledger. The small gesture felt strangely significant. Laws written by people who believed royal blood mattered more than individual choice. Emily's stomach tightened. Could you use those laws to keep me here? Yes. His honesty startled her. Could the council demand it? They could try. Emily held his gaze. And would you let them? Adrian did. Not hesitate. No. The fire shifted softly behind him. Without the royal clasp, he somehow looked less like the distant figure from the throne and more like the man who had caught her before she hit the floor. Emily, listen carefully. Whatever this connection becomes, you do not belong to the crown. You do not belong to an old law. And you do not belong to me. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Even if I am your mate. Especially then. Adrian stepped closer, but stopped several feet away, leaving the remaining distance for her to choose. If you ever stand beside me, it will be because you walked there yourself. Emily had spent years being told where to stand, when to work, when to speak, and when her discomfort mattered less than someone else's schedule. Hearing those words from the Alpha King felt almost impossible. You would really let me leave? She asked. When Margaret says you are medically safe and Ethan says the immediate danger has passed, I will personally open the gate. A faint smile touched Emily's lips. That sounds dramatic. I am a king. We have a reputation to maintain. She laughed before she could stop herself. The sound surprised all of them, especially Adrian. Then the drawing room door opened. Ethan had sent a guard to question Madeline, and now the commander returned with the altered staff schedule and a second document. His expression erased the brief warmth from the room. Madeline admitted changing Emily's assignment. Emily's smile disappeared. Why? She says she received a written instruction from the Royal Council office this afternoon. She believed it was routine. Ethan placed the document beside Adrian's clasp. The request moved Emily from the West Gallery to the exact corridor used for the king's private service. Adrian examined the signature line. Who authorized it? Councilman Richard Voss. Emily remembered him immediately. Silver-haired, perfectly dressed, always close enough to the throne to be noticed, but never close enough to appear ambitious. Ethan continued, there is more. Madeline says Voss specifically requested Emily by name. Emily felt the room narrow around her. Why me? Ethan's gaze shifted. Toward the old ledger. That is what worries me. The Royal Council maintains restricted historical records. Adrian looked at the crescent symbol beside Evelyn Bennett's name, then at Voss's authorization. The same realization reached Emily a second later. Someone might not have chosen a clumsy maid because she was invisible. Someone might have chosen Emily Carter because they already knew exactly who she was. Then we stopped guessing, Emily said. Adrian looked at her across the drawing room. What are you proposing? We asked Councilman Voss why he requested me. Ethan shook his head slightly. If Voss knows we suspect him, he may simply deny everything. Then do not tell him what we know. Emily glanced toward the altered assignment sheet, the service card, and the ancient ledger. Let him think I am still the maid who accidentally ruined his plan. Adrian studied her expression. You want to return to the moon court. I want to hear him explain himself when he does not have time to prepare. Emily, there may be safer ways. There may be. She held his gaze. But you just told me I get to choose. For several seconds, Adrian said nothing. Then a faint, almost reluctant smile touched his face. I am beginning to understand the disadvantages of keeping my promises. Less than 20 minutes later, the doors of the Moon Court opened again. Conversations faded as Emily entered beside Adrian. The ballroom looked different now. Earlier, she had crossed this floor carrying wine with her eyes lowered. Now she carried nothing. Ethan followed with the recovered service card and altered staff schedule. Councilman Richard Voss stood near the royal platform, silver-haired and composed. Lady Victoria Hale watched from several feet away, while Madeline remained near the servants' entrance, visibly anxious. Voss stepped forward. "Your Majesty, surely this disruption has continued long enough." The maid became confused after exposure to Moonroot, and an unfortunate accident followed. "There is no reason to keep the entire court waiting." Emily stopped. Her heartbeat seemed to disappear. Adrian's eyes shifted toward her. Ethan became perfectly still. Nobody outside the private investigation had been told what Margaret found. Emily looked directly at Voss. "How did you know it was Moonroot?" The councilman's expression changed for less than a second, but she saw it. "I assumed that was the substance involved." "Why?" Emily asked. "There are many herbs that could cause dizziness." Voss straightened. "I have served this kingdom for 30 years. I recognize the signs." Emily took another step forward. "Then perhaps you can explain why you ordered Madeline Cross to move me from the West Gallery to the King's private service corridor." Whispers spread across the ballroom. Voss looked toward Adrian. "Your Majesty, are you truly allowing a servant to interrogate a member of your council?" Adrian descended from the royal platform. Emily expected him to move in front of her. Instead, he stopped beside her. "I am allowing a witness to speak." Voss's polished expression tightened. The reassignment was routine. Ethan placed the original schedule beside the altered version on a nearby table. "Routine changes are processed through household management. This request originated from your office." Voss looked at Emily again, and something in his expression made her understand. He was not surprised by her courage. He was surprised she knew anything at all. "You knew who my grandmother was," Emily said quietly. The room fell silent. Voss did not answer. The Royal Council had access to the restricted Bennett records. "You knew I was descended from a Moonbound family before I did." Lady Victoria's eyes widened. Madeline covered her mouth. Adrian remained motionless beside Emily, giving her the space to finish. Voss finally spoke. "Old bloodlines are matters of state. My life is not a matter of state." Emily's voice no longer trembled. "And neither is my freedom." Ethan stepped forward with the documents. "Councilman Voss, you will remain in the palace while your office records are reviewed." Voss glanced toward the doors, where 2 royal guards stood calmly in place. No one touched him. No one needed to. Adrian looked across the assembled court. Tonight, an Omega servant noticed what powerful people overlooked, questioned what others accepted, and spoke when silence would have been easier. Emily turned toward him, surprised. His gaze softened before returning to the crowd. "Remember that before you mistake rank for worth again." For the first time since Emily had entered Blackwood Palace 2 years earlier, every person in the Moon Court knew exactly who she was. By sunrise, Blackwood Palace no longer felt like the place Emily had entered as an invisible servant 2 years earlier. Councilman Richard Voss had been suspended from royal duties while Ethan reviewed the records from his office, and Madeline Cross had been cleared of knowingly participating in his plan. She had followed what she believed was a legitimate council order, never realizing why Emily had been specifically requested. Dr. Margaret Wells confirmed that the Moonroot had finally cleared Emily's system. The strange connection between Emily and Adrian remained. There would be old records to examine, questions about the Moonbound bloodline to answer, and perhaps truths neither of them was ready to understand. But Emily knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would decide what those truths meant for her life. She stood beneath the stone archway leading from the palace courtyard, holding a small travel bag while morning lights spread across Blackwood Valley. Adrian waited beside the fountain roughly 20 feet away. He wore no crown and no silver wolf clasp. "The carriage is ready," Ethan said gently. "It can take you anywhere you want to go." Emily nodded. "Thank you." She looked toward Adrian. He had promised to open the gate when she was safe. Now the gate stood open behind her. "So this is really my choice?" she asked. "It always should have been," Adrian replied. Emily swallowed. "You are not going to stop me?" Something vulnerable crossed his face before his familiar control returned. "No, even if the bond says otherwise." "The bond does not get a vote." Emily almost laughed. And the ancient laws? They definitely do not get a vote. She smiled, but her eyes suddenly burned with emotion. Then she turned and walked toward the gate. 10 feet. The invisible pull beneath her ribs returned. 15 feet. It strengthened. 20 feet. Emily reached the threshold and stopped. Adrian had not followed. That was when she finally understood him. He could command an entire kingdom, yet he refused to command her heart. He was willing to endure the distance rather than turn affection into obligation. Emily looked beyond the gate toward the road descending through the pine-covered hills. Freedom was there. Real freedom. And because it was real, she could finally choose without fear. She turned around. Adrian remained beside the fountain, watching but not calling her back. Emily started walking toward him. Then faster. Surprise crossed his face as she closed the distance and wrapped her arms around him. For one heartbeat, Adrian stood completely still. Then he held her gently. The strange pressure vanished, replaced by a calm so natural that Emily wondered how she had ever mistaken it for a cage. "I thought you were leaving," Adrian murmured. "I was." Emily looked up at him. "Then I realized there is a difference between staying because someone will not let you go and staying because you finally know where you want to be." Adrian's expression softened. "And where is that?" Emily smiled. "Here. For now. We can figure out the rest together." The palace bells began ringing across the valley as sunlight touched the highest towers. Emily was still a little clumsy. Adrian was still an alpha king, carrying more responsibility than any one man should. Their history was unfinished, their bond remained mysterious, and destiny still had questions waiting for them. But none of that mattered as much as the choice they had made freely beneath the morning sky. If this story reminded you that true strength can be gentle and real love always respects choice, please like the video, share it with someone who loves stories of courage and destiny, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable journeys.